August 26th, 1799. You have read this strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congeal with horror, like that which even now curdles mine? His delicate and lovely eyes were now lit with indignation, subdued to downcast sorrow, and quenched in infinite wretchedness. His tale is presented in a manner that appears to be most straightforward truth. Yet, I own to you that the letters of Felix and Safie, which he showed me, and the apparition of the monster seen from our ship brought to me a greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his asseverations, however earnest and connected. Such a monster has then really existed. I cannot doubt it, yet I am lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavor to gain the particulars of Frankenstein's creature's formation, but at this point, he was impenetrable.
Are you mad, my friend? Or where does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create a demonic enemy for yourself and the world? Learn from my miseries, and do not seek to increase your own.
Frankenstein discovered that I had made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them and then corrected and augmented them in many places, principally in giving the life and spirit to his conversations with his enemy.
Since you have preserved my narration, I would not think that a mutilated one should go down to posterity.
My thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been consumed by the interest in my guest, which this tale and his own elevated and gentle manners have created. I wish to soothe him, yet I can counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope of consolation to live? Oh no. The only joy that he can now know will be when he composes his shattered spirit to peace and death. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature must he have been in the days of his prosperity. When he is thus noble and godlike in ruin, he seems to feel his worth and the greatness of his fall.
I believed myself destined for some great enterprise when I was younger. My feelings are profound, but I possessed a coolness of judgment that fitted me for illustrious achievements. This sentiment of the worth of my nature supported me when others would have been oppressed, for I deemed it criminal to throw away in useless grief those talents that might be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflect on my work, no less than creating a sensitive and rational animal, I could not rank myself with the herd of standard projectors. But this thought, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in the dust. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing. Like the archangel who aspired to omnipotence, I am chained in an eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my powers of analysis and application were intense. By combining these qualities, I conceived of the idea and executed the creation of a man. Even now, I cannot recollect my reveries without passion, even though the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my powers, burning with the idea of their effects. From infancy, I was imbued with high hopes and a lofty ambition. How am I sunk? Oh, my friend, If you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me in this state of degradation. Despondency rarely visited my heart. The high destiny seemed to bear me on, until I fell, never again to rise.
Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend who would sympathize with and love me. Behold, on these desert seas I have found such a one. But I fear I have gained him only to know his value and lose him. I would reconcile him to life, but he repulses the idea.
I thank you, Walton, for your kind intentions toward so miserable a wretch. But when you speak of new ties and fresh affections, do you think anyone can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where any superior excellence does not strongly move the affections, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds, which can hardly any later friend can attain. They know our infantile dispositions, which, however, may be modified afterwards, are never eradicated. And they can judge our actions with more certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. A sister or a brother can never, unless such symptoms have been shown early, suspect the other of fraud or false dealing. When another friend, however firmly he may be attached, may, despite himself, be contemplated with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear, not only through habit and association, but also from their merits. Wherever I am, the soothing voice of my Elizabeth and the conversation of Clerval will be forever whispered in my ear. They are dead, and one feeling in solitude can persuade me to preserve my life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, I could live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being to whom I gave existence. Then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die.
My beloved sister, September 2nd, I write to you, encompassed by peril and ignorance whether I am ever doomed to see again dear England and the dear friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice that admit no escape and threaten to crush my vessel every moment. The brave fellows who have agreed to be my companions look towards me for aid, but I have none to bestow. Our situation is appalling, yet my courage and hopes do not desert me. Yet it is terrible to reflect that the lives of all these men are endangered through me. If we are lost, our mad schemes are the cause. September 9th, the ice began to move, and a roaring sound like thunder was heard at a distance as the island split and cracked in every direction. We were in the most imminent peril, but as we could only remain passive, my chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased so much that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked behind us and was driven with force towards the north. A breeze sprang from the west, and the passage towards the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them. We will soon return to England.
Do you then really return?
Yes, I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return.
Do so, if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak. But surely the spirits who assist my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength.
Saying this, he endeavored to spring from the bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored, and I often thought the fire was entirely extinct. At length, he opened his eyes. He breathed with difficulty and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend certainly did not have many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed, watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought he slept. But presently, he called to me in a feeble voice and bade me come near.
The strength I relied on is gone. I feel that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy and persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that burning hatred and ardent desire of revenge I once expressed. But I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last days, I have been reflecting on my past conduct. I do not find it blameworthy. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature and was bound towards him to assure his happiness and well-being as far as was in my power. This was my duty, but another was still paramount. My duty toward the beings of my species had greater claims to my attention because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and did right in refusing to create a companion for the first creature. He showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness in evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to destruction beings who possessed exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor did I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself, that he may render no other wretched, he ought to die. The task of his destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish and vicious motives, I asked you to undertake my unfinished work. And I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason and virtue. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task. Now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting with them. But considering these points in the well-balancing of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of my death. I dare not ask you to do what I think right, for I still may be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other respects, this hour, when I momentarily expect my release, is the only happy one I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it is only the innocence of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. Yet another may succeed.
His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sank into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted to speak again but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the gentle smile on his lips faded away. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow. A cloud of disappointment overshadows my mind. But I journey towards England, and I may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight. The breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stirs. Again, there's the sound of a human voice, but it is hoarser. It comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein still lie. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God, what a scene that has just taken place. I'm still dizzy with the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it. Yet, the tale I have recorded would be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated and admirable friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find words to describe, gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he turned over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended, and color and apparent texture like a mummy's. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror and sprang towards the window. I never beheld a vision so horrible as his face, of such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I involuntarily shut my eyes and endeavored to recollect my duties concerning this destroyer. I called him to stay. He paused, looking at me with wonder, and again turning towards the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by the wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion.
That is also my victim. In his murder, my crimes are consummated. The miserable series of my being is wound to its close. O Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I who irretrievably destroy thee by destroying all thou lovest. He is cold. He cannot answer me.
His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend and destroying his enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dared not raise my eyes to his face. There was something so scarring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died away on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. At length, I gathered resolution to address him in pause of the tempest of his passion. Your repentance is now superfluous. Frankenstein would have lived if you had listened to the voice of conscience and heeded the strings of remorse before you had urged your diabolical vengeance to this extremity.
And do you dream? Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He suffered not in the consummation of the deed. Oh, not the 10,000th portion of my anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of its execution. A frightful selfishness hurried me on while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Do you think the groans of Clerval were music to my ears? My heart was fashioned to be susceptible to love and sympathy, and when wretched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of the change without torture such as you cannot even imagine. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland, heartbroken and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of its unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated wretchedness and despair upon me, he sought his enjoyment in feelings and passions from the indulgence of which I was forever bared, then impotent envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for revenge. I recalled my threat and resolved to make it a reality. I knew that I was preparing for myself a deadly torture, but I was the slave, not the master, of an impulse which I detested yet could not disobey. Yet when she died, nay, then it was not miserable. I had cast off all feelings, subdued all anguish, to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demoniacal design became an insatiable passion, and now it is ended. There is my last victim.
I was at first touched by the expressions of his misery, yet when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said of his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I again cast my eyes on the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. Wretch, it is well that you come here to whine over the dissolution that you have made. You throw a torch in a pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and lament the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object. Again would he become the prey of your accursed vengeance. It is not pity that you feel. You lament only because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power.
Oh, it is not thus, yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purpose of my actions. I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I ever find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feeling of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed that I wished to participate in. But now that virtue has become a shadow, and that joy and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair, what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone while my suffering shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, fame, and enjoyment. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now crime has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. When I run over the frightful catalogue of my sins, I cannot believe I am the same creature whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of goodness, beauty, and majesty. But the fallen angel has become a malignant devil. You who call Frankenstein your friend seem to be aware of my crimes and his misfortunes, but in the detail he gave you, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery I endured, wasting in impotent passions. Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? I, the miserable and the abandoned and abortion to be spurned out and kicked and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice. But I am indeed a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept and grasped to death his throat who never injured me or any other living thing. I have devoted my Creator to misery. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that with which I regard myself. I look at the hands that executed the deed. I think of the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived, and long for the moment when these hands will meet my eyes, when that imagination will haunt my thoughts no more. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor any man's death is needed to consummate the series of my being and accomplish that which must be done, but it requires my own. Do not think that I shall be slow to perform this sacrifice. I shall quit your vessel on the ice raft which brought me and shall seek the most northern extremity of the globe. I shall collect my funeral pile and consume to ashes this miserable frame, that it remains may afford no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. I shall no longer feel the agonies which now consumes me, or be the prey of feeling unsatisfied yet unquenched. I shall no longer see the sun or the stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. Light, feeling, and sense will pass away, and in this condition must I find my happiness. I should be weeping upon the threshold of my death, but now it is my only consolation. Farewell. I leave you, and in you the last of mankind whom these eyes will ever behold. Soon these burning miseries will be the thing of the past. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. The winds will sweep my ashes into the sea. Farewell.
The monster sprang from the cabin window and said this upon the ice raft close to the vessel. He drifted away on the makeshift vessel, lost in the waves and darkness of distance. As I looked upon my friend, I grew sad. knowing that his story would soon end when his grand experiment becomes an effigy of fire, whose ashes shall forever be encased by ice. My friend's story was tragic, born out of the unrepentant desire to ignore nature and test the power of the gods themselves. He strove to create something magnificent, only to construct a hideous, cataclysmic demon that brought forth his ruin. As I drift further away in my ship, continuing my journey, I wonder if his story is uniquely his, that no man shall dare tread the ground where he walked upon. No one shall follow in his footsteps, be led to an undesirous end by folly, and die alone and be buried amongst the dirt, as we all are entitled to. This fatuity, my dear sister, is one I hope not to repeat. I look forward to seeing you on more serene shores and in an environment secured away from this heartbreak. Until then, I shall continue to write and think fondly of my dear friend, Victor Frankenstein.
This concludes the story of Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. A heartfelt thanks goes out to our performers, Patrick Eldon, Morgan Irby, Bakari Garvin, DJ Peevler, Ella Talmadge, and to you, dear listener, for joining us on this journey along the river. I look forward to exploring the river again soon through Riverside Readings, an audio drama podcast where we bring the classics to life. Hosted by me, Trent Miley. Until next time, as we set off on our new adventure.